Hey guys, this is Ed from Mission Ed Possible. Today we have something a little different. We're doing an interview with the guys from Into the Vertical Blank, a podcast you should probably be listening to. So I went down to California and I interviewed these guys. So let's get into it.
Thanks for joining me, guys. I'm with the brothers Fulton of Into the Vertical Blank. So we're down here in sunny California. It's actually sunny. Yeah, it's actually been really bad weather, right?
We have sun. You know what? There was a tornado.
I heard
down there. Right? There was like 30 miles one way and 30 miles the other. There were tornadoes the other day. Yeah. Today it's nice and sunny. Today we have Ferris Bueller's.
What's funny is I was talking to a friend of mine about that, and she's like, "Yeah, it hit a trailer park." I'm like, "Of course it hit a trailer park." Yeah, that's just like that's what it's
they're always in flat areas.
Yeah, I know.
It's not the trailer park.
That is. But it's just kind of funny. It's just the target.
It's kind of like the evidence that fruit flies, come from fruit, right?
Yeah,
because they're always around fruit.
Exactly. All right, so start off. Where did you guys come up with the name for the podcast? Into the Vertical Blank.
Okay, so I was starting in 2017? I had contacted Kevin from the Antic podcast, and I said, can I do some game reviews on there? So sure, and then I did one, and they don't really cover games very much, and so I said, okay, well, I'm going to take that one and redo it into a podcast and there's Taco, you'll be there. Where I want to call it Option Select Start.
Option Select Start.
So because it was about the Atari 8-bit, right? Option Select Start. Then I said, wait a minute, what about display list interrupt? and then I said, oh, wait a minute. How about the vertical blank? And then Steve and I were talking. I did one. It was called Into the Vertical Blank, and it was a review of an Atari 8-bit game. And then we started talking. We said, why don't we do something about stories, a little more story-driven, and it's us being in the vertical blank. We're not going to use that conceit a lot. We're not going to make it really be like we've traveled back in time or anything like that. It's just going to be like that's where we are when we're thinking and talking. So it's not as like a TV show that shows spinning graphics and you're back in time, but it's kind of like that. We're in the vertical blank. It's where the magic happens.
It's a headspace.
It's a headspace.
So it's he came and he wanted to he's like, I want to do game reviews. And I'm like, that's cool. And I've been writing, for 20 years, right? Mm-hmm. All sorts of stories that never published. I'm like, well, I want to take some of these things that I've been writing and I want to record them. And so that's that. And so I took my piece and I'm like, I'll do your video game thing. That's cool. And then and I wasn't really
not video game though. All Atari.
I wasn't really into the Atari revival or the 8-bit stuff, kind of a little bit. And I was like, but I liked it and I had all the emulators and stuff, but I wasn't really in he's like, people have made all these new games and stuff. I'm like, really? That's cool. And I've been a member of Atari Age since it started, but don't really go every once in a while and see. So I was like, I like the game thing. Let me see if we can combine it with this idea of storytelling. And I think in the first episode, Toys R Us was closing.
Right.
What if we go to Toys R Us and talk about walk through Toys R Us and talk about what it was like to go to Toys R Us when we were kids and look at the game cage and the games. Well, we go to Toys R Us and actually we both chickened out and didn't take any video or anything. Recorded. We went back to the car and
there were not people doing YouTube videos everywhere at the time though, right? Having a camera go to a store, security's going to jump on top of you. Now
it's always weird.
Now security's afraid to get you because here's a guy making all the noise. This is Taco.
So where were we? We were
going to Toys R Us.
We go to Toys R Us and we chickened out. We went in the car and we talked about it. But we're like, oh, there's something interesting here about the cross between playing the games and memories of getting and having them and then telling stories about them. And it just kind of grew. It grew from there. And it's gone on. I think at the beginning, Jeff had some fake British voice.
For the first entire season, I had a text-to-speech app with this British voice. She would come in and she would get pissed off. She would call us nerds. So the whole first season, I think I want to make these into videos somehow but she would come in every time and she would do our fact checking. We would say hey, nerdlingers, we don't care. Nobody cares about that except for you, stuff like that. And then I got rid of it because it's so hard to do.
Sure.
But it was fun. But it was nobody was listening, so it didn't matter.
Yeah.
Hello, buddy.
Oh, say something about John Romero.
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure, but Romero was selling selling a bunch of his old games online, and I bought his copy of Shoot 'em up instruction set. I believe it is.
For the
I think that was
Apple.
It was for the. I think it's for the.
Yeah,
I don't remember.
a lot of old school.
I just thought it was fun to get his. You know, he only sold it for like $5. I bet he wanted way more for it.
Yeah.
But still.
So anyway, so going back to Toys R Us. So you guys wanted to go into Toys R Us and film it, but you didn't want anyone to look at you weird.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, also it was. I said this was YouTube. We all think that YouTube and all these and TikTok, all these videos, people having videos everywhere and like recording their life. It most of it's now. Like it just started. So back then it was a little weird. It's like now, like I didn't know 5 years ago, no one was filming stuff at the gym. I got a gym thing. I'm going to the gym and everyone's got their cameras. I'm all, turn off your camera, man. It's like anyway. So it's like it's weird. So that time it was just really self-conscious. Like what are you doing, man? You're 40 something. Like, why are you taking a picture of yourself at Toys R Us? Right? That was
I know.
Yeah, but it's cool. I totally get it.
We actually had a podcast many years ago as well. Before actually, I think before the podcast app existed. Mm-hmm. It was for our website, which was called 8-Bit Rocket at the time.
Okay.
And then we were making Flash games, and we were actually reviewing Flash games from Viral Flash games, like people on Mochi Games, which was a whole big like indie game thing at the time. Mm-hmm. And so we would review those games, and then we started doing a few Atari ones. So we did Atari ST1, and I mean the audio is garbage. Everything's garbage. It's garbage. But it was way back, and we put it on YouTube. Mm-hmm. At the time, they got a lot of views because no one made it. There's nothing that was on YouTube. Then we left and
early days,
and we didn't do anymore.
We stopped for about 7 years, and by the time we got back, it was like there's no way to get back into it, right? Well, we did, but the point is like our life. Jeff and I end up stopping things way too early most of the time.
Yeah,
and then by the time we come back, it's like, oh, we missed the.
You should hear the monthly conversations I had with Steve, which is like, hey, once in a podcast. I don't think I want to do it anymore, man. I'm so tired of this. No one ever listens to all, and it's like, well, can we just not stop until it actually makes a difference at some point, right? Like,
so that brings a question. What started first? So the podcast or the YouTube channel? Because you have
the podcast started first, and the YouTube channel. We've always had different YouTube channels, basically. But the YouTube channel is relatively.
I think there is. Okay. I think if you look, I think there are some videos that predate the podcast.
Yeah, but we weren't pushing them.
Well, it was because we're putting up a video of like fireworks. And
there's no.
Okay. I got you.
There's no there. Yeah, in the YouTube, where just this year we started like, okay, let's try to get a couple of videos a week. Crack the seal or do some long form like Atari ST history stuff or like Steve's.
Yeah,
things
at one point we were like, oh, what if we take some of the segments from the podcast and make videos out of them, right? And there's a couple up there. There's one called like the top 10 worst products for retro gamers, which was a story we did in the podcast, and then we did a video for it. It's like 10 of just god awful things from electronic games, right? So that's up there. Not really a lot of engagement on that. I thought people would think it was funny, but it's a weird tone. And there's another one that we did. I think I did one about the Star Wars story, which was about us going to see the Star Wars characters at Toys R Us back in '77. My dad took photos, so it was kind of a way to like show these amazing photos from '77. Sure. And then a couple of years ago, we did one again that was about called the Atari 2600 Almost Killed Me, and that was me trying to learn how to program the 2600 with the Atari Basic, and how I almost killed myself driving through a red light when I was thinking about programming the 1700.
Yeah, I think
and so, but those really like not a lot of. We don't, since they came out once every 3 months or 4 months or something. Yeah, it's hard to get anyone.
Now we're starting to go back and take the old parts of the podcast and the stories and put them into video because they're universal. They're not timed. There's no news and stuff. There's stuff that's not news. Right?
It's evergreen.
And then new stuff every podcast episode. Now we're either putting a video out before or after that is an actual segment from it that's fully done in video. So last one we did the one about different strokes or whatever, and then we'll do one each time. So that next podcast is actually going to be having Steve's story in it.
This year we did the video first for the Lost Dutchman Mine video, And then now we're going to put it in the podcast.
Yeah.
We'll see if how it goes.
Yeah.
And then we'll have a discussion about it.
So a lot of the content has been, it sounds like your stories, because I've been listening to that. Now, do you write them for your podcast, or have you already pre-written?
Some of them, I mean, it depends on, some of them are pre-written, some of them are ancient and rewritten, right?
Okay.
And some of them are new versions.
Okay.
Some are brand new. Some are new. Some are written specifically for the podcast, and some are not. Some are just written. I write some stories for the local newspaper as well. So, so they're in a similar vein, but not the same subject matter, right? So some of them cross over. Yeah, some of them are new, etc. It depends on what we decide to talk about that day. Like maybe we're trying to dig up what should we do a podcast about. And I'm like, remember that story I did about Little League Baseball? What if I add something?
Somehow wedge in Atari in there.
No, there is. So I'm like, oh, there's Little League Baseball. And I'm like, and so there's a story that I've written. It's about Little League Baseball, but it's about how I pitch sidearm. And then it's about how at the exact same time, all these people, it was the same year that the PTAs came out and they wanted video games banned, right? And my point about the story is, well, you know what? High school sports are worse than video games.
Yeah, Steve's arm
I lost the use of my arm for years. I never lost use of my arm from playing video games.
Coaches will go ahead, throw sidearm, 12-year-old or 11-year-old, and it's like not knowing that he could never use his arm again.
That one's not ready, but I mean, so something like that. It's like wedging or find an angle.
Where we do have those from the one about Star League and those that we are going to make into videos too.
So we could spend the whole time talking about Star League, but let's not talk about
Star League. Star
League Baseball is one of my favorite games.
Wait, no,
I have a whole bunch of stories.
who's the guy who made Star League? Because I believe he's still works at EA Sports now, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't forget his name right now.
You should put it on the bottom of the
The
guy who was GameStar. I believe he still runs EA Sports.
He started EA Sports.
Oh, wow.
They hired him and he made
wow.
he did Star League and he did Star Bowl and did some other games for the Commodore 64 that we didn't get because Atari 100. And they did Championship Baseball, which was on the ST, I think. Oh, maybe. But then he went and he was the
never did that whatever in the credits or the ads on GameStar or the Star League Baseball.
I'll tell you one thing.
I can't remember the name of it. It's like something in the bubble.
Oh, that game. Yeah. It never came out.
Was it ever a thing, or was it just a joke?
It wasn't because I think he wanted to do it on the Atari and there's one. But here's one thing about Star League Baseball. One anecdote. I played Star League Baseball. Lots of extra innings to see if anything else showed up on the scoreboard. And the other animations, nothing else showed up. I would go I got to a place where I was curves and liners, and I could beat the
no one can know what this is.
I could beat the computer 10-0, or there was goose eggs all across the board, and. Now and I would get to it, I would just keep on playing to see does something magical happen in inning 25. Does it? And I don't think it.
Wow. That's how it is.
I was a little, I was 14 or something.
I still, to be honest, I don't know if you guys do this. I have the theme song that pops in my head.
I love the
It's the 8-bit one, right?
Yes. Absolutely. Did they remake it for the ST?
I don't think so.
So Championship Baseball is on the ST. It's the same exact game with different colors.
Oh yeah,
interesting.
And that one came out on the Commodore 64 also, but not the.
Now we did do a Crack the Seal of 7800 baseball, which in some ways reminded me a little bit of GameStar baseball. I never played 700 baseball.
No. So anyway, here's a great question for you: why Atari? Why did you guys start with this?
I think you have to go back and listen to the entire podcast.
Yeah, so Atari is like we had seen Atari in the arcades in the 70s, and we had played some Atari games, and that was the name that kind of stuck out. Although we liked Cinematronics and all the other ones, right? But we had played the 2600 at a friend's house, and that was and there's no way we're getting a 2600. It was 1978.
Yeah, right? So that one is so that story is intertwined with the fact that we were Catholic, right? So we had to go to CCD. We didn't go to Catholic school. You had to go to this thing called CCD if you want to get your first communion. Okay. And every Catholic has got to get a first communion. You can stop after that. But that's what you got to do, right? So it's a 2-year program. And my mom, who is a great mom, but she started us a year late. So we had to go to school with a bunch of kids that were a year younger than us. And this girl up the street.
Not school, we had to go to
CCD
class.
So there's a girl up the street, which we didn't know, but my mom met her mom somewhere, and we were going to carpool with her. This is like 78, right? We go up to her house, and she has every electronic toy imaginable in her room. And she's got a 2XL, and she's got Speak and Spell, and she's got an Atari 2600 with the original 9 cards, right? And so we're sitting there, and we're looking at the gatefolds, and it's air sea battle and combat, and since this is 78. I want to say Canyon Bomber, but it was probably later. That was probably when we were going to our house later.
Sure.
So we see those in that artwork, right? That artwork on the boxes combined with the actual games to play. I mean, that's just stuck in the vertical blank.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like there's no way to extract that. And something about the way that Atari 2600 screens were the same on both sides. Come on, what word am I looking for? They were. What? Symmetric. Thank you. They were symmetrical. The way the Atari 2600 games were symmetrical, and the fact that even the mazes that like Adventure are symmetrical in a way that like, games later wouldn't do. There's no way you would make things symmetrical. That doesn't make sense. But like that Atari thing about symmetry and the colors and the color cycling, and there's something about it that just stuck as like, that's as a thing that I can't get out of my head. It's very formative, right? And maybe maybe I knew even at the time that the games were not amazing. Like you play Street Racer, you look at the box of Street Racer and go play it, and you're like, this game is awful.
Always knew the 2600 wasn't technically awesome. We just thought the 2600 was awesome. But right? Like there's a difference between it. Right?
But there's a game of Street Racer called Number Cruncher, and Number Cruncher is it was fascinating to play 2 players, because the idea is as you press the button and it speeds up, higher numbers come down, and if you're skilled enough, you can kick the other guy's ass by getting more and more points. And it was a really great multiplayer game. And like Surround is an incredible multiplayer game. If you play Outlaw is an incredible 2-player multiplayer game. So is Combat. A lot of us, because there's 2 of us are playing these games together. And that's a lot of it too, right? It's not just sitting, we've had a lot of ST stuff, Atari ST stuff that we did sit and play together. But like a lot of those memory stuff are you playing alone, right? You're playing a game on your own. And a lot of gaming is alone, not multiplayer gaming, but those initial times with the 2600 were as a group playing together.
And our dad was he didn't really want to guess a video game, but at some point, his friend talked to him about Zork on the Atari 800. And my dad was all, we got to get one of those. So basically, it was really expensive. We're talking about at the time, they're talking what about almost like $4,000 now or something to get 800 in a disk drive. So we finally got one, and and we stayed loyal to Atari because our dad was like, oh, Atari. Okay. Yeah. Like it wasn't Commodore, nothing wrong with any other computers. Apple, our friend had, it was way too expensive. But it's like Atari was just there, and it was good. And it was the one we remained loyal to.
Oh, there's one other thing I think that actually solidified it. So we're sitting down watching a game show. I don't know, it was like 82 or 83. And it was a game show. I can't remember exactly the name of it, but they would read, it was like the SAT. They'd read a story at the beginning and tell a story, and then the contestants were supposed to remember parts of the story and answer it. I think it's on Hitman is what it was called, I believe. And it had a bizarre game show, right? Based on reading comprehension.
Wow.
I looked for I said, I want to find the Atari episode, but I can't find it anywhere. But they read a story about Nolan Bushnell. Oh. And so kind of combining that, and Fashion Atari had grown over time, but like hearing that story about Bushnell, who I believe at that time was actually doing PR to return to the video game business, but I didn't know that, right? Hearing the story about how he created Atari, he's alone. There's no Ted Dabby, there's no Al Alcorn. It's just in the story, and how he created Chuck E. Cheese. It's very much a PR story. But to us, I was like, oh my God, not only is Atari cool, this is an amazing story that I just heard about. So it kind of all solidified into kind of this sort of amazing thing that we would like to reach to and be part of. I want to program games to be part of it.
Yeah, we want to. And one thing that you'll know this, but not people who maybe are younger who may watch your channel, but like information was scarce. Like you had to go find anything you wanted. So information was all done through either little newspaper articles or magazines, or word of mouth. And that was it. So like you didn't, or your friends had something. That was it. So you couldn't go anywhere to find out the stuff. So it was actually almost an existential search, trying to find information to do it. It wasn't like you could just sit down and turn on the TV or the YouTubes and see something about, right? You had to, so it became such an interesting thing to you because it was like, took much more time, much more of your time to just find out what it is.
Well, that's what we were so excited about, like Electronic Games Magazine or Electronic Fun. But Electronic Games, to begin with, even though the news was so old, the street date is a month after it comes out, right? And then the stories are usually 3 months old as well. So you're talking about like a 4-month gap, right, in your information. And that, but that was our Bible, right? That Electronic Fun as well. Which is a good magazine in a different way. Atari Age, but that came out every 3 months and was 10 pages of advertisements. Right?
It was good though. We still loved it.
It's still loved it, right? It was
Nintendo Power before Nintendo Power.
But that was just a few. You're right. The information was very scarce. Games magazine sometimes had a little bit of information. I think the first time I saw an advertisement for Activision games was in Games magazine, long before Electronic Games came out. And I remember seeing an ad and it showed like 4 games. And it was like bridge and checkers and fishing derby and drags around. I was like they shouldn't be exciting games. But I think seeing that ad and going, wait a minute, there's another video game coming besides Atari? Like, mind blown.
Going to purchase, I think going to like May Company or whatever and seeing like one of the department stores and seeing in their glass case Activision and a Magic Games was like, what the hell is going on? like someone else likes this too, and they're making more stuff. Like it was, amazing. Yeah.
Like, it went from just, hey, it's our friend up the street who has this Atari and has got some games for it. It's going to be like anything else. It's going to go away in a couple of years. So like, wait a minute, this is a real thing.
Right. It's not 2XL, the robot you put cartridges in. It wasn't like handheld Mattel football. It was actually something that was like, this could be a job.
Not that those things weren't cool. Those are great.
That's a great segue. My next question, how did Atari have influenced your careers?
Probably wanted to do more film and stuff. So even though we're thinking, like, each of us had the idea that at some point we would go into film or make movies, but having that computer background and doing the Atari stuff and then knowing that, there's going to be more advantages in doing stuff on computers really sort of formed everything that went into Web 1.0. Mm-hmm. So when you're there in 1997 or 95, Web's coming around and you have a job, like I had a job doing computer stuff, computer programming, but like suddenly the internet's there and you have the World Wide Web and you can combine together a little bit of graphics, a little bit of stuff and do some interactive things. Suddenly that kind of put everything together. So starting, I always wanted to make games and stuff like that. Didn't really think it was going to be a career.
Well, I did. See, and I go and I look at them. There was this is a great and kind of depressingly sad moment in my life. In 8th grade, I won this award for most outstanding boy or something, right? At the graduation.
When we graduated.
And I'm like, and that was a mistake that they made. But I remember, oh my God, like I told them that I wanted to go to MIT, and I'm like, where did that come from? Like, I don't even know what MIT was at the time, but I think at the time I did, and I've totally forgot about this. I wanted to program games for Atari, like that's what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. But when the crash came, it was like, oh, I have to totally rethink everything. Right? And then we were also like 14, so we got into like new wave and so like things at the same moment that Atari kind of went away, even though people say there was no crash. It did. No, it did. Okay,
there are very few people that say
it literally imploded.
There are crash deniers.
I think they're from different areas. So the crash deniers are mostly like. They're not deniers. They're from different countries where it didn't happen to them. Like in England, they just kept on with their spectrums and their cultures.
But you weren't as affected.
Yeah,
here it was like literally an atom bomb.
An atom bomb went off.
Right. And we were 14 years old, so we were just kind of like coming out of that age anyway. So it was like, oh, maybe Atari's not a thing anymore. I still want to learn how to program. I still want to do it. I think it'll be cool. But like Jeff said, like we got into making these movies
and stuff,
and then we made the titles for the movies on the ST, and then we actually did end up returning and making an ST game in STOS called Zamboozle Poker Dice, which is the epitome of a reach of someone who has no talent but is overreaching to try to make something. It's up on Atari.
So
we finally got it up Atari.
Nice.
There's two versions, right? There's a version from 1990. I made another version in 2020 also.
Okay.
So and it was made back in '89. So it was a real original game from back then, but like it plays a good game of Yahtzee.
Yahtzee on steroids.
But with extra stuff, and we really want to put in like fireworks and all sorts of stuff. It's as ambitious as it is awful.
Yeah.
I'm trying to say, it shows like, hey, we really want to do something interesting, but at the time we didn't have the talent to do it. Yeah. We needed to go back to the drawing board and figure out what we want to do. And like Jeff said, some of that was like we got a little bit of basic programming plus STOS programming plus we learned COBOL in school and a couple other languages.
Database stuff.
And then also at the same time when you're doing 8-bit and 60-bit stuff, you're designing graphics. You're designing 8-bit graphics and 16-bit stuff and trying to learn how to make characters and when
shadows and stuff.
And when Web 1.0 came around, like Jeff said, building websites was a combination of a little bit of code, a little bit of scripting, a little bit of graphics. We didn't really have graphic designers at the time, so like we were making animated GIFs and we were making, but it was kind of that same overreach with STOS. It was like we weren't that good at it, but no one else was doing all
of it. So no one was a Renaissance man at it.
I remember wowing people with animated GIFs. Or GIFs or whatever I call them GIFs, right? I mean, I remember someone was like, there's stuff moving on the screen, you're hired. I'm like, fantastic, right? But that turned into a turning point to actually go into web development and then into game development. So then Jeff and I are both working at a large toy company, and at the time, and we were working on these websites for brands, and they needed games, and they were outsourcing it. We're like, wow, we've got programmers, we can do this internally. And for a decade, we made
hundreds of games.
It's about 200 games.
Oh wow!
We programmed them, and our team programmed them, and they were until about 2011, and then we wrote a book about Flash and wrote a book about HTML5 Canvas, and then the whole sort of it was an indie game industry on the web that just completely crashed.
And then it came back up as apps and things on
cell phones.
Yeah, cell phones and then stuff in Steam, like in the PCs and stuff. That's fine.
But as we had our team building those games, we started. A lot of them were not retro, had not played video games back in the day, or they weren't really into it, or maybe a little bit. So we hired people to come in and teach people about retro games, because retro games were our inspiration.
That's funny. You hire people to teach.
We hired Chris Crawford.
We hired Chris Crawford. Chris Crawford came in for a day and gave a lecture on retro games. Who's the guy who did VCS Missile Command in Demon?
Rob Fulton.
Yeah, Rob Fulton.
Okay, Rob Fulton came in a day on game development. Yeah. Bill Kunkel from Electronic Games came in a day on game development, because what we were looking at the time was like the types of things that we could get up on the screen that were like under 100K, because we're still talking, this is still pre-broadband. So we're still like, something's got to load quick, it's got to be under 100K. Basically, the games that we could make had to be inspired by what came in the past, right? So we taught our team to do it, and we were successful for about a decade. But things change, right? Technologies change, everything changes, and so we went to do other things. But it was a great run.
That was a great 10-year run.
Wow. Hey, yeah. Okay, that's cool. Yeah. What advice would you give to your younger selves? Like if
learn some language.
Actually, yeah, no.
Don't stop.
Learn language and learn C++ quicker, earlier.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, or stick with C++ or Java.
Don't listen to your guidance counselor who says you can't hack it.
Yeah,
that was a little, excuse me, bullshit.
They would. And basically, work harder in high school, because college turns to be easier than high school.
Yeah, so much easier than high school. Should have spent way more time.
But no, but realistically, it's like learn assembly language or C++ quicker. That would be much
for the 8-bit.
And that doesn't mean sticking in coding, because I'm not really. Modern coding just makes glaze.
The one thing that does concern me about learning assembly language to 8-bit back then was it does seem like there is a technology cliff that people run into.
Right.
If that's their formative thing, and they're doing 8-bit assembly language, and then they turn that into their career, and then technology changes, and having that ability to move to the next technology sometimes is really hard. You don't see a lot of people that graduated from the VCS to the 800 to the 60-bit era to NES. There are some, but not as many as there were. Right?
Yeah.
People get stuck, and so for me, in some ways, it may have been better to not have got stuck back then, and to be able to then apply my minimal skills to a new technology at a time when it was worthwhile.
Yeah.
So I don't know, right?
Yeah, I feel like that even with that's the way to move from that would be to then move to the higher level languages a little fast. Not big. I mean, past big.
C++.
And Steve would have liked to have done 16-bit assembly language too, ST and stuff like that.
Yeah, that would have been awesome. Yeah. We can still go back and do it now.
Of course, that's the thing.
That's what now is for.
That's what now is for. So here's a question. So I mean, we're all familiar with the history of Atari and all that. What do you think that Atari should have done differently?
Oh my God! We have hours.
We distill it down into like a 5-minute.
Atari. Couple things. Atari, when they sold to Warner, was actually, and helped them get the VCS out. But what they did was Warner was a marketing company and a content company, in quotes. They weren't a hardware company. That helped get the VCS out, and it made Atari what it was. The problem is they never, from the guys that came in there after the VCS, and the same guys, Jay Miner and his team, they made the 800. That technology stayed in the 8-bit technology, except for the 7800, all the way until 1991. They were no longer an engineering company. There should have been a VCS2, a VCS3, all those things, and then you might have had enough improvement in games that people didn't get jaded in 1983 and say, "Hey, there's nothing here for me. Let's move on."
Yeah, it's just that no one knew. I mean, I'd say that too. Like the VCS again was cool, but it was surpassed technologically. Even just a quick year or two later by other systems. They should have been releasing a new system every 3 years, like Nolan Bushnell wanted to. And it's one of the reasons why he was gone, because he wanted to do it. I think a lot of people have problems with Nolan Bushnell about how he was a carnival barker or whatever. But I think a company like that needs that guy, just like a Steve Jobs. You need the tech guys, and you need the person who's going to go out and dream it up and maybe fake it till they make it at the same time. I think they missed that other side, right? When he left, they didn't make a follow-up to the VCS. If they had made a follow-up to the VCS in '82 when Pac-Man came out, it would have been on the 8-bit hardware probably, and it would have been significantly better. And it is. I mean, there are people now. I know people go and say, "Oh, Pac-Man's not that bad on the VCS. It's good." No, when it came out and we were 12 years old, it was the first atom bomb. Like people are like, "Oh, you lie. You have an Atari VCS." And Pac-Man came out. Like basically, you're stamped with you're an idiot, right? Because you're a moron. You're a moron, and it's like it was like that. It was like, wow, you're associated with that garbage. Not that it wasn't. Not that it's not a fine.
Todd
game.
did a good job. Todd did a great job. 2 players, and put 2 players in there.
Yeah.
Should have had a blind
Just a lot of stuff.
I got it. We understand.
But as
we could put a whole video on it.
Oh yeah, so there is a video I did last year with No Talking, which is just showing all the ads that they put out for Pac-Man and how the run-up was literally millions of dollars in advertisements to run up to that day and then to release something that was just subpar. And it also, in that same video that we have online, it talks about how the reviews for video games in magazines like Games and video and electronic games stuff, that before that day, almost entirely game reviews are, wow, it's another video game. And look how cool this is. It's something new.
You shoot stuff. This is fantastic.
And they're all.
There's nothing to base anything.
Yeah, right. So it's all about like enthusiasts saying, we love
magazines were for
game industry,
not reviews,
and we want to make sure that other people get excited about games. Pac-Man comes out, and it's like Atari like offended their fan, their actual enthusiasts. It's the equivalent of Star Wars Episode 8. It's like all of a sudden Lucasfilm is bad. because they made a bad Star Wars review. All of a sudden Atari's like, oh my god, like Atari isn't bulletproof. And this video game industry, if those people writing the magazines who are seeing themselves as journalists want to do this right, they can't just come out and say this is a great game.
Right.
It was like a schism at that moment. You're like, oh, wait a minute. We have to come out and say this is a piece of garbage.
The dawn of video game journalism.
Right.
But also,
and it's not a piece of garbage in the sense of like it's not Pac-Man.
It's not what people want.
Not what people want.
But Atari's biggest mistake from there really was no visionary. Like you had, even for what they say about Jack Tramiel, he still drove Commodore to do good. He still drove the new Atari. At least a visionary. Yeah. That Atari, after Noel Bushell left, there's no visionary there at all. There's nothing. It's like a bunch of suits and a bunch of engineering guys and a marketing that's driving everything. And that was the recipe for disaster. They didn't get out. They didn't say, wow, we got this great new thing to, Pac-Man came out the same year Atari 100 Pac-Man came out for the 400. Fantastic game. You didn't see, you saw a little bit about that, but it wasn't like Pac-Man Day for the Atari 100. Like, if people had seen that version, they went, wow, this is fantastic.
And there are some, I did way too much time when I was sick going through advertisements. So there are some advertisements that for computer companies about 3 months later, like, hey, Pac-Man for the 400.
Yeah. But it's not like the
and a lot of people didn't know that an E.T. game came out for the 8-bit too. And the E.T. game
is pretty good.
Okay, it looks good. It's still kind of a weird game. It's kind of the same game, but
you don't fall into as many pits.
In a way, I don't think
it's a totally different game. I played
you still get pieces though.
The problem I think with E.T. is not that E.T. is actually a bad game. I think the problem is that making a game about E.T. is really a fool's errand.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to make a point-and-click adventure or something, it's really not the subject matter for a video game. It's like making a video game like for the movie 1941 or something. It just doesn't make any sense. It's not the subject matter. So say again, actual VCS Pac-Man in the abstract is a decent game. Right? It's a decent maze game. If no other maze game had ever come out, you'd be like, hey, this is kind of a fun
little game.
There you go.
As a replication of the arcade game, when people's expectations were like, we don't even, we don't really know what the capabilities of the VCS are. Missile Command looks pretty good. Asteroids is kind of weird, but still fun. Space Invaders is amazing, right? You're like, okay. So when Pac-Man comes out, it should be a reasonable facsimile. And it just wasn't. Right? That's the problem.
So all boils down to Pac-Man.
Well, it boils down to
so should we call Howard?
Exactly.
It's not E.T.
It's not E.T. It's not Todd. It's not Pac-Man.
Todd.
It's not either.
Todd is okay.
It's not either. It's the fact that hardware innovation stopped when Bushnell left. Yeah. They did not innovate to a new platform. There should have been a new platform out. They should have released a game on a new video game platform. That should have been the flagship. Even when they released the 5200, they still stuck it behind the VCS.
And also put Breakout out as
competing with your own company is just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, that's
the 5200. And it's funny to me is seeing commercials because I started looking through commercials too. They would show the 5200 graphics on the commercial for a 2600.
Right, and then
a little star at the bottom. 5200 graphics. Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
They should have, and no one knew how to market video games at the time, right? But they were worried about cannibalizing their audience and stuff. But then they should have made the feature backwards compatible.
Yeah.
They should have.
Actually, concept.
There was actually this is last comment if you want, but when they were starting to build the Atari 400, or what was going to be the next generation in 1978, the first thing they thought of was backwards compatibility. Sure. It would have been if they had made an Atari 400 with the new chipset backwards compatible and it worked and you could buy the new games, and then they made another one 2 years later that was the 6800 or whatever that was again backwards compatible, but was now better than the ColecoVision or better than the NES because they easily could, or was 7800 style with better sound to do a Pokey or Amy or whatever. You're talking about Atari being the Apple of today and Nintendo being a competitor. Not that when kids hear Atari, they say, sucks! That's all they say. They don't know anything like that.
It wouldn't have been the paradigm shift that we
exactly. There was having no visionary leader
Yeah, no, totally all suits.
I don't want you to just cut out the thing that says Pac-Man garbage, okay? I'm just going to show that because what I meant is
you've seen my videos, right? You're talking about it. So I could, on Pac-Man, I can name off like 5 things.
You guys just
did
did them.
done.
Yes.
I'll cut it out to make it better. And
people have done it, right?
Even I know the homebrews have come out with new versions.
Oh, of course. Well, you're 1980. You did the 82 one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I did the 81. I've done
okay. Yeah.
I want to see you guys do the 82.
Oh yeah. Let's see. So why do you guys think that Atari fans are such diehards? Like, because we're not alone here. There's very rarely do you see somebody like, oh, I like all retro stuff equally. It's like, no, Atari fans are like, no, we're Atari fans. We don't care.
It's because of the Pompeii, and I think like July. I think it's July 4th. Let's say it's July 1st, July 4th, July 15th. I don't remember. It's one of those days. 1984. Everything that Atari was doing at that moment stopped. I mean, this company gets sold, but it's not like a new leader came in and they're just like, hey, let's just continue all the games. It's like everything that was in development is like frozen in time. So that's why when people find like games that were never released and stuff like that, it's like, oh, because there's a literal moment in time that we can see that like that whole industry ended. But none of us who were alive at that time or were ready for it to end. We were ready for it to shift. We were either going to computers, but we weren't ready for that to happen. And so I think there's also almost 2 years where video games disappear from the stores too, because everyone's telling us it's a fad, and all the PTAs are telling us that it's gonna, we're gonna become criminals.
Exactly.
Right? Everything's against it, and I think the idea that like there was this amazing company that became huge, the biggest, fastest growing company in the world at $2 billion in like 1981, right? 1980 or 81. And it's the biggest thing going. And then within 2 years, it just does not exist anymore, right? As if it was wiped off the planet. We go to high school. In high school in 1984, 85, 86, you don't talk about video games. It is over. Yeah, it's like if you even there's no one's wearing an Atari shirt. Yeah. You get your ass kicked if you're wearing an Atari shirt. Right. So it was like for a few years it just disappeared off the face of the earth. Now it could have been because that was the exact time that we went to school and everything, and younger kids don't have the same experience. But for us, it's like, oh my God, we lost this thing. And then at the same time, Chimino comes in, and for more than a decade, we're like looking at hoping that it's gonna now become the thing again. But it's always a disappointment. And so you get the vaporware thing, where it's also that like, oh, we're going to get the graduate keyboard. No, that's not going to happen. The 1400 and 1450 XLT. No, that's not going to happen. The 7800. And 7800 to me is the big one, because you look at that and you're like, this could have been a contender, right?
Put a Amy chip or dual pokey in there and you're set.
And it doesn't come out. So you're like, oh, it's like a long series of like disappointments. And I think that disappointment is part of it as well.
I'll tell you, there's one thing. Okay, so I have the 14-year-old theory. Okay, so even though we at 14, that happened because we were born in 1970. But Atari, when you're 14, it's a huge change in year. And there's a guy named Pat Finnerty, Steve knows, he's online. He does What Makes This Song Stink, and he loves Weezer. But when he was 14, his favorite Weezer record came out. He hates Weezer after that, and he found a guy who's in a Weezer cover band, and he said, "What's your favorite song?" And it was some song that Beverly Hills. And that song came out when that dude was 14. And he said, well, and a lot of kids love Nintendo. It came out when they were 14. Right now, it came out when we were 16. We didn't have it. For us, that formative year was like we moved to high school and Atari died, and we're trying to find new stuff, like finding your way in the world. That kind of sticks, right? It sticks right here. Like, that's the formative time. And from then on, it was like, like Nintendo came out, but like we were into computer games that time. Like we're saying, we're playing Ultima and these great games,
Dungeon Master, right?
Dungeon Master and the ST, and people are talking about Zelda. Like it didn't compute. It's like, that's a little guy running. It looks cool. It's great. It's awesome. But this is a real game over here on this computer, right? Like anyway, so it was like, and Atari to us was like, it didn't end because we had the 800, and it ended. We had to find games, got the ST. and then Lynx, kind of a little bit of Jaguar, and then it had to end. Like at some point there was no more, and we went to the PCs and stuff, but it didn't rent. It was like if you looked for it, it was there, and it was just wasn't constant.
It was just, but it was
even though you knew it wasn't the constant everyone else had. Like it wasn't like there's no delusion that it was still the big thing. It was like you had to search for it, and actually that searching around, trying to keep that passion going, also was like that's why it's Atari.
And you make a good point. I mean, when we got our ST in '87. The only ST there was, you could buy some software locally, but soon all that disappeared. The only way we could get a software on Atari ST was to take our sojourn out to a place called Computer Games Plus, where they had all the import games. And so every month we were going there, getting a new ST Action magazine, picking up a few games, and it was like that idea that we had to travel somewhere to actually get the stuff and bring it back.
That's just it made it work for it. You had to work for it, right? You had to search at Toys R Us. You had to look beneath all the crap on the bottom shelf to find your 7000 games. They weren't even on tapes. They were strewn. There was no Atari merchandiser. The NES guy came in and put them all nice and paid them money for merchandising. The Atari guy set up a box. They just dumped the box. They didn't even put the box out. You had to go in the cage and point at games.
I remember that.
They were new. Hey, what's that back there? They go, I don't know what that is.
I remember seeing Tower Top with that.
So anyway, it was the search. I think for us, it's like the search. We come from the 70s where things were searched. You had to do your own research, right? So having that search there, having just forced at you by Nintendo, it just didn't work.
No, it's just funny because it's funny to me is like we have very similar kind of things, and it's kind of a universal thing.
It's universal.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because people like Atari fans, it's a different kind of breed than a lot of the other people. We were talking earlier, Jeff and I were talking about, it's like, we're into retro, but we're actually into it's like this proto retro. It's not even what normal people think of as retro. It's like that's not.
There's a podcast called what's it How Did This Get Played, right? And I stopped listening to it because they annoyed me, but it's a good podcast. But they talk about the 2600 as if it's like a 4-bit game system. I have to write them saying, no, it's a 6502 processor. It's the same as the NES. They don't want to hear any of that. They just want to be able to make fun of what they want to make fun of.
6502 would have been better.
Yeah. 6507. It only addressed 4 caches.
Yeah, exactly right. Really?
6507.
I know it's cheaper, yada, yada. But did you guys growing up, so for you guys had one computer or one console, right? Did you guys have any issues with sharing it when you got into the?
We would side by side do stuff all the time.
Okay.
Plus two-player games were good. There was a little bit maybe, but
I think in '86 when I got Ultima 4, I think I did.
One person monopolized while the other person playing.
Yeah, he didn't play, so that was I monopolized the computer. He might have played a little bit at the beginning. Yeah, but I got so into Ultima 4 and dove into it.
I think the problem is
I got to the last room. That's what's the okay. So in the video we just made about Lost Dutchman, there's a little bit of point there where like I got to the last room of Ultima 4 and I never finished it, which is why I needed to finish the Lost Dutchman.
I had a girlfriend first, and Steve had Ultima 4.
That's right.
You have a girlfriend. That's it.
But then eventually it got to when we sat down side by side and played Fantasy 1 and Fantasy 2 on the ST.
Oh, yeah.
When time just stopped.
It was just Crown.
Time stopped. It was like, it must have been 3 weeks, and it looked like that was a day during the summer. Yeah. It was like, oh my God, this is the greatest game ever. Because it was sort of like you got that D&D style thing without, and we sat together next to it. So D&D style thing without having to sit in fall asleep at someone's house and eating too many snacks at their house or whatever it was, right? Like everyone's. And so it was like that was where we could just sit there and do it together. And from then on, we programmed stuff together. So
we had not a lot of fun. We actually the best.
So you're a pair programmer.
Yeah,
right. Pair programmer. We also got through college by one guy reading the book. We took all the same classes. One guy read book. Other guy would take notes on the Atari ST. Probably think ST writer. We
put them out in this printer, tiny.
Then we had a 24-book printer. We print them on this tiny print, and we take them to school. And we quiz each other. So like in a way, we had a little bit of that, a little bit of arguments every once in a while, but for the most part, it was very synergistic.
Yeah.
Like we helped each other out the whole time.
That's awesome. So, was your computer ever taken away as far as punishments?
No, because our parents just kind of let us. That was the thing that was like, whatever they're doing in there is better than being out smoking pot. Basically, that was it.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I mean, there's certain people. It's like, oh yeah, take their computer away. Or it's like. that's a lifeline.
We do it now. We take all the monitors away if we have to.
But
back then, no, it really was. They were just happy that we weren't out killing people. Right?
Right.
They were just happy we weren't out doing whatever it is that
stuff.
Our sisters had kind of done it for us because they were in the 70s. They were punk rockers, and they would go out
all the time.
Like it's teenagers, they were out all night long. They're defying our parents, all this stuff. So we were golden
compared to them.
Comparison. They're playing like Program on the Grid, like whatever you guys want to do. We didn't get David taken away. They just didn't even. I mean, they barely knew what was going on, which was good.
So I listened recently to the BBS one, the Baltimore one. So did you guys do a lot more with BBS?
We were from 1985 until we were constantly online from 85 until now. Basically.
Well, no, there were a couple.
We didn't run a BBS.
There were a couple. We ran a BBS for one day.
Oh,
the problem is we had a Vox mode. The Vox mode was not auto answer. So someone called you like, we're on the phone with a friend like, call our BBS. Yeah. And so he calls and we like switch it on to answer. We had it when it was fun.
So it was only in the 8-bit era?
Only 8-bit era we had.
You never did it in the ST era?
No, we went to WID. That's when we just downloaded loads and loads of software.
There's a story I've been developing about our pirate days on the ST. We used to there's a guy in
Sarge
in the Air Force named Sarge. Sarge is BBS, and he
was a staff sergeant at Fort MacArthur.
Yeah, we shouldn't. I think he got in trouble for this because we would go to his website and download stuff, and then a bunch of us with a couple of our friends, we actually drove down to his house, his place, and copy stuff. But like. Just a few weeks after that, the Sarge's BBS went down and never returned. And then we did get a hold of him once. He's like, yeah, I sold my computer and bought a fish tank. And it didn't sound like the Sarge wanted to do that. It sounded like something.
I don't want to say anything, but we just don't know what other things he was into. So we have no idea what his wife did. I don't think she cared about video games. We did something else.
So we did, we probably did until like 91. And then I don't think when we got our first PC.
We had a modem.
But I don't remember.
We didn't do too many.
I mean, obviously,
there were a couple of years there where
we did go online. I mean, right away we had a what was it? Netcom subscription, which was basically right about the time that the first time that Kevin Mitnick was captured he went to Netcom had helped, and so we got Netcom right after that because they had helped capture him. Didn't know he was actually shouldn't have been captured. Didn't know he was the hero. Did not know he was the hero.
Exactly.
Anyway, but around then, it was.
The BBS era was incredible, though. I'll tell you.
Yeah, the BBS era.
The original BBS era, like, to where I remember we met a guy online who gave us some pointers on how to do display lists on the 8-bit. I really didn't understand.
That was in the
podcast. Cool.
I did find his stuff in the magazine too.
And we met people online that we met in real life. It was a really interesting era. It wasn't
the first South Bay Atari users group we went to. South Bay. It was actually South Bay was where we lived in Manhattan Beach and Redondo, whatever else it's called. South Bay. It's not the South Bay. It's not the South Bay up there. It was called the South Bay Atari enthusiasts or something like that. Anyway,
S-Base at South Bay.
The first few of them were actually only a mile from our house, which was great. Later on, they moved further away. But so we would actually go there, and there was a lot of Atari people, and right at the time when Trammell had taken over, and they were just all like up in arms about, you're going to get rid of the 8-bit. I mean, but I remember, so there was a little bit of a community there at the time, but the only community you really got after that was through the BBS, really. Like that was it, and it was social media in a sense. I remember writing like record reviews and stuff for some of these ones. This weird stuff,
whatever. So here we go. What is your favorite game out of all the systems on Atari?
If I'm gonna play a game on Atari, it's probably going to be Asteroids.
Okay. Which version?
I like the arcade version of Asteroids. Although on a system, the 7800 version is my absolute favorite. But I would play the Atari ST game called Megaroids, which to me, Asteroids to me is like that Sisyphusian task that you get to keep playing and you get to keep scoring. And that video is going up someday too.
Well, that's all arcade games.
Yeah, but that one to me is cleaning up the screen. I don't know what it is about cleaning up the screen and then having the saucers, but Asteroids. My two favorite arcade games are Asteroids and Food Fight. So
if we're talking Atari, if it was last year, I would have probably said Asteroids. But when I got one of those arcade one-up machines, I don't know, it's not a real arcade game, whatever. Fits in my house, I love it. I love it, and I got to play Millipede for the first time for real. Like I used to see Millipede in the arcade. I'm like, put a quarter in. It's like, oh, that's just Centipede Plus, but actually getting to know and actually playing Millipede and understanding how it works. That is an incredible game. Whoever made that game knew the nuances of how you ramp up the scoring. Like you can restart the game at the high score level behind the high score you just got. So you can all the way up to like level, I think all the way up to 300,000, then it stops. So the game becomes a race to 300,000 points, and then a endurance test of how many points you can get above 300,000 in one game. And as of today, I still have the high score. It's the Wi-Fi high score list on camera. I still have the high score at like 412,000 or something. But to me, I was like, this is an incredible game. So if it's an Atari game, if it's not an Atari game, probably Dungeon Master.
Are you talking about a game like for the 2600? For instance?
Just in general, just on one of the Atari systems.
On one of the Atari systems, I always arcade. One Atari system, Dragon Stomper.
Yeah,
Dragon Stomper on the 2600 we had
it's a Star.
We had a Star. We got the StarPath Supercharger as soon as it came out because that was like led us towards computers can use tape, so this can use tape. StarPath games, some of the arcade games are just okay. It had 6Ks, you could put all the graphics in there and things like that. But Dragon Stomper, the multi-load, first you travel around. This is one of the greatest 2600 games ever made that very few people talk about.
It's got the first
level.
It is so good. Yeah, it is such a good game.
The first level is, and this is designed in '82, is a RPG grind. You're walking around this one map and you're finding monsters to fight so you can get better and better so you can get to level 2, which is going to the store to buy stuff.
Oh wow!
And then level 3,
that seems really deep.
You go to fight the dragon.
No, it's the first RPG. It's a real RPG. Like it's not like and at the time nobody knew. Like nobody. That's why it's Zelda before there was Zelda, and it really is like it's multi-load, 3 loads of this cassette. They knew what they were doing. Like those guys all went on to do Epics and the Amiga. Like they did all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
What's funny though is the one thing that kind of bothers me about it is that Adventure, you were the dot, right? And I loved Adventure. I love finding the dot in Adventure, but you were a dot, and there's something about that. But the thing is, it embarrassed me because I got it at the same time. It was the same era when Pac-Man came out, same era where our friends were getting ColecoVisions and other things.
And television of Dungeons and Dragons was awesome, and the dot, we had the dot.
And so it's embarrassing, but I loved it at the same time, which is also that sort of weird thing about Atari. But Dragon Summer, you're also a dot. You're so much smaller dot.
It would have been so much. And they did it because they used the ball.
High resolution.
You were the ball. You were the ball. You were the ball. It's small. But still, it was like it would have been much better if they had been able to use like a sprite for it. Yeah. But still, that's a good game.
That's a great game.
That'd be cool. Yeah, I look forward to it.
It's a little bit of an unsung game when people come to. You should do a lot more. Like
I have a video coming out about it.
Yeah, it's
maybe we'll talk about it another time.
Well, cool. I think that's about all I had for today.
That's enough.
Let's ask Ed some questions.
Yeah.
Hope you liked the interview. If you did, be sure to hit the like button. It really helps me out. If you'd like to see more videos like this, be sure to click up here. And as always, see you in the next adventure. Take care.